Hugh Hefner is the founder, editor-in-chief, and chief creative officer of Playboy. He's the subject of a new documentary. It opens July 30th wide, called Hugh Hefner, Playboy Activist Rebel. Is this your documentary, or was it some group producing it about you?
Well, it's produced by a young lady named Bridget Berman from Canada.
Did she trace your whole career and follow you around as
well? Well, not really. I think that she won an Academy Award some years ago for a documentary on Artie Shaw, and that's how we originally met. What she was interested in doing was the part of my life that most people don't know about.
Are you happy with it?
More than happy, yes. Yeah.
Let's take a look at a clip from the new documentary about Hefner.
We published the last piece ever written by Martin Luther King, and we published it shortly after his death. His widow actually edited it. There is an outrageous incongruity of it all. Of course, that we should be sitting there in the heft pad listening to Martin Luther King's dream. Yes, well, people don't recognize or realize the extent to which it was part of my dream, too.
How'd you first become involved in this, we call it anti-segregation movement?
Well,
You got
I don't know.
College, right?
Yes, well, in a small way, but I was never really part of a major a movement as such. I think there were a couple of occasions. I went to the University of Illinois, and I think there were a couple of occasions where there were some segregated restaurants, and I was there with the students protesting that. But it just comes from family. I think that bigotry comes from family. I was raised in a very conservative Midwestern Methodist family, but there was no racism. I think that, my part in terms of all of this really was related to the fact that when I did the television show, it was a social setting, appeared to be a party in my apartment.
Sure.
And, black and white, mixed as they did in my home. And back in 1959, 1960, that was unusual for network television. And the same thing when we opened the clubs. Dick Gregory was the first black performer to appear in a club that wasn't a black club. And when there were clubs opened, franchise clubs in Miami and New Orleans, we expected our black members to be accepted there. And when they weren't, we bought back the franchises, even though it cost us a little money.
Did you ever understand why people would not like people because of something like skin pigment?
Well, it's that crazy notion of, birds of a feather flock together, the notion that somehow or other that if a person is a little different than somebody, they're suspicious of them. And, it's one of the sad things for me on this planet, whether it's race or religion or whatever it is. We live on one very small planet, and we ought to learn to live together.
Now, some say, yes, Hef, you supported blacks, but you set back the women's movement.
Well, it takes a very curious attitude towards Playboy to come up with that conclusion. In other words, the notion that our sexuality, the fact that we are attracted to the opposite sex, that there are two sexes on the planet, is a blessing, and it's something I think we ought to celebrate. The fact that there are hang-ups related to it, I think, is reflective of the fact that we are, and still remain, essentially a Puritan people.
But you don't think that Playboy at all made women objects rather than equals?
I think that women, in the best sense, and not in a negative sense, are objects of desire. That is a celebration of one's own sexuality and the fact that we are two sexes. And what Playboy tried to do, quite frankly, is to elevate it to another kind of level, that did celebrate that. And prior to Playboy, there were lots of connections with sexuality in magazines, but they were connected to sin and sensationalism. Playboy tried to give it a little style, and I think you need to talk, quite frankly, to the women who posed for Playboy and see how they feel about it. Most of them continue to be friends over more than half a century, and I get wonderful cards after the Christmas and birthdays.
They still want to pose, right?
They still want to pose.
Was it tough to speak out
No.
early on? No?
No, never difficult. No, I think that a privilege to be in a position to be able to speak out, to be able to make some difference. I think that of all the many things that I'm grateful for in my life is the fact that I've been able to make some difference and in the process have a lot of fun doing it.
And you used the magazine, frankly, as a tool, did you not?
Absolutely.
The Playboy Forum.
Yeah. Well, to begin with, the magazine started in 1953, and it was really a lifestyle magazine. But in the early 60s, the magazine was so successful, I knew I could do the other half of what I'm really all about, which is, you know, the social justice and it wasn't simply race. It had to do with sexual prejudice. It had to do with drug prejudice. It had to do with
How about gays?
very much with related to gays. We did a piece that had been turned down by Esquire called The Crooked Man. We published it in the middle 1950s, and it was about a future society in which normal was homosexual and the aberrations was heterosexual. It simply turned the thing over. It was very controversial at the time, and some in some quarters considered homophobic at the time, and it was intended to be exactly the opposite.
I had the honor of being a Playboy interviewee in the mid-'90s. How important was that interview? Did you come up with that initiative? Was Q&A in the first issue?
No. When I talked about the other half of what I was all about, in other words, that part, the Playboy philosophy, the Playboy interview, and the nonfiction on controversial subjects began really in the early 1960s. And the first one we did was conducted by Alex Haley, who did a whole bunch of them for us. And it was with Miles Davis, and he didn't really talk about jazz, he talked about race. And that was the beginning of it. And Alex Haley did Martin Luther King for us and Malcolm X, and then did the American neo-Nazi.
Oh, yeah. Norm Rockwell, right?
Yes.
Remember him?
And not Norman.
No, not Norman. No, quite a difference. Do you think we'll ever see a day when it's not an issue? When we will be colorblind, really colorblind?
I can't answer that. It certainly won't happen in our lifetime. Look at how separated we are by religions. I mean, religion is supposed to bring us together, but religion becomes one of the major sources of conflict on the planet. How crazy is that? The thing that concerns me, quite frankly, is that we live on a planet in which our technology and our science has gotten to such a level in which we can destroy the planet and destroy one another, and we have not yet learned to live together. Crazy.
Yeah, technology is way ahead of humankind,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
It boggles the mind.
Yes, we're still superstitious savages in the jungle on that level.
However, there's another side, though. We're still better than most, aren't we? As
Yes.
a country.
I certainly think that, if one looks back over the centuries, we're certainly making progress. We're moving in the right direction. Yeah, there's hope for mankind.
You feel like you've lived through it all?
Well, we have certainly lived through very interesting times. Yes, I think that the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century is a fascinating time.
Were you against the Vietnam War early?
Yes, yeah, and said so in the magazine.
Did you ever envision the success Playboy has become?
No, how could I? I started the magazine on $600 borrowed dollars, a total investment from friends and relatives of $8,000, just enough to publish the first issue, with no notion of what lay ahead.
What year was that?
1953.
Who was the cover?
Marilyn Monroe. Good choice.
Pose picture?
It was a pickup photo. Most of the first year was pickup material.
You bought it from the
From
freelancer.
a photographer, right? Yeah.
Was the first issue a success?
Yes, hugely successful, or I wouldn't be around for the second issue. But the second issue didn't have Marilyn in it, sold more than the first. There was what caught the attention of the people. In other words, it was the Monroe nude in that first issue that got the initial attention. But what made the magazine successful was the message. It was a lifestyle magazine for single guys, and back in the 1950s, that was a revolution.
Was there a centerfold in the first issue?
Yes, although it was a single page. Yeah,
That it was a centerfold in the second issue?
single page. Yeah, we didn't get to
The
the
fold out?
yeah, we didn't get that till about the second or third year.
Magazine industry's in trouble, though, isn't it? Now
Yes.
the world has changed.
Yes, the
We're up
internet
against
arrived.
the internet, right?
Yes,
Can you make money off the internet?
is anybody?
I
Some
don't-
people, I guess. No, I don't think we're making anything significant out of it yet. But at the same time, it's a very nice way to interconnect with your audience. I mean, you get a playback immediately. I got a gift from my girlfriend, Crystal Harris. Gave me an iPad for my
Oh,
birthday.
do you like it?
I like it very much, and I'm now a Twitter bug. When I was a kid, I was a jitterbug. Now I'm a Twitter bug.
Speaking of girlfriends, how many have you had?
How many?
Girlfriends. Have you counted up the number?
I haven't been counting.
How many do you have now?
Just one.
We
I'm
were
settling down.
half. No more to threesomes, huh?
No, I found a very nice lady.
You just celebrated your 84th birthday. You're trying to buy back the magazine. Do you ever think of just, as Adlai Stevenson once said, go out on the beach and eat some strawberries and watch the dancers?
I think that if you stop doing what you love, I think it is the first step towards the grave. I think that it is the combination of the work and play that keeps you alive, keeps you vital, keeps you connected.
Yeah, health deteriorates if you're permanently retired.
I think so.
Yeah. What do you want your legacy to be? You want to be Hugh Hefner, businessman, civil rights activist, philanthropist?
Somebody who played some positive part in the changing social sexual values of my time. And I think I'm pretty secure in that.
Do you still read every page of every issue?
No. The
You used to
magazine's
do that,
headquarters.
didn't
I used to at the very beginning, but the magazine, the major headquarters are in Chicago. What I still do is pick the covers, pick the playmates, pick the pictorials, oversee the total package, and see that it's together and making sense.
Continued good health, you.
Thank you.
You're a young 84 and you changed America.
Thank you very much.